from Genesis, from the when he committed the sin, God sacrificed what? A lamb, and gave the skin of the lamb as covering of their sin. Death came from.
Not sin, but the nakedness, because they
But
have
then-
become aware.
Naz,
that
please,
mature-
I can't expect
yeah.
you to make this argument because you're smart. You know they were naked. Did they know before the sin they were naked?
They were innocent. They were
Exactly, like a child. You
Yeah.
take a 2-year-old.
Genesis is not
let him
Bible.
run around naked. he has
Genesis
no
is
idea.
not Bible. Genesis is not Bible. It's Torah.
So
Christian
Naz,
copies lies from Torah, put it in
Adam
the Bible.
and Eve, they were the first sin they committed. God had to sacrifice an animal, and which was a lamb. Because it starts right from the beginning. God is saying, Lamb of God is going to cover your sins. Here is the tunic and stuff, wear it to cover your sin. Now that sin wasn't there until they disobeyed.
But
And they were
Jim,
naked before,
could have
but
been
they
a
were not naked
dinosaur.
in their eyes because there was no sin in their eyes. Do you understand? Because they're innocent, like a child,
It
right?
doesn't
A
say
child doesn't
lamb,
know
I
he's
don't
naked, right?
remember reading.
Because he's innocent. So that innocence was taken from them by their sin.
Yeah, I know when they sin, they realize
Their innocence is gone. Now they can see them naked, and they're ashamed. That shame is original sin. That shame is death. You're wearing clothes because of that. All right, bro. It was nice
Do
talking to
you
you
believe the
guys.
dinosaurs were before or
Thank you
after
for listening.
Adam?
Sorry?
The dinosaurs, did they come after Adam?
Oh, please
or
don't go there
before?
right now. Okay, thank you, sir.
You're spreading lies.
Because of
it was-
You
are
it was a
spreading
pleasure speaking
lies.
to you guys.
you
I
Please
have the
understand,
truth. You have the
All I
lies.
want to do is make sure you guys understand where we come from, because there's a lot of misconception.
I am
about-
Messiah, you are a liar.
about
Hang on, boss. Let me speak. Hang on.
about
He tells
original
lies.
sin, and why do you have to have blood for sacrifice? Because you had to have blood from the beginning, from the Garden of Eden. You had to have kill an animal to get the skin onto your covering, because they were covering with the leaves, and the sun came out and the leaves are gone.
That animal could have been a dinosaur, which
no.
God used in
No,
order
that's
to
a whole
create
story.
clothes.
Naz, we will have another talk
Okay.
about dinosaurs.
So,
Please,
can,
not today.
can I ask you another
Yeah,
question?
please.
Don't
And it's not
No,
going
it's
to be
about sin, about sin.
yeah.
About sin.
All right.
Let me ask you a question. Maybe you're not the person to ask this. But you see the Jews, some of the Jews, like the Orthodox ones, they don't accept Jesus
Yeah.
died for their sins.
Yeah.
They don't slaughter anything in their temples now.
No, because
in
their
relation
temple
to
is gone.
forgiveness of sins.
Yes. So ask them that question. And that is what a big problem for them. Do you know that? Do you know
No,
that?
but
problem-
they still go to their synagogues and they still pray.
yeah, but
and
they're
ask for
supposed to.
forgiveness.
They're not doing what they're supposed to do. They're supposed to do sacrifice in the synagogue. Why don't they do that? Ask them. Ask them, bro. I've asked them.
So what
don't
did they
have
say?
to.
What was their response?
The guy that I told, oh, I don't know. The one that, I'm not like this. I'm like, you ask, do me a favor. I'll stand next to you like we did now. We'll go to a Jew, one of those guys that are Orthodox, and we'll ask him this question: why aren't you doing sacrifice as you are mandated to do for the forgiveness of your sins? Just ask him that question. So don't ask me that, because I know they're not doing it, and that's wrong.
Well, I know they don't do it, but I'm just thinking as to why.
No, but I've asked them, and they
would say they're under the old law. They still follow the understanding of the old law.
If
But
you
they
want
don't
to talk
slaughter.
about the Jews, it's very clear. Jesus said that, this temple, not a stone will be left on this temple. That's what he said, and that's what happened 70 AD. Because he said, this whole thing is finished because I have come. Do you understand? The whole Bible, the Old Testament, is about the coming of this Messiah who's going to save the world. Now, how is he going to save the world? He's going to save you from your sin. All the sinners will be saved through him. And there will be a new kingdom. A new kingdom is Jesus' kingdom, which is
That's
not
lie.
of this earth. So that is the whole
World
story
will
of
be
the Bible.
destroyed by nuclear
right, guys.
weapons.
Any other
Nuclear
question?
weapons will
Any
destroy
other
the
question,
world.
or should we end it
When
here?
Jesus come back, there'll be nothing left.
No, not for forgiveness of sins or anything. If you want to have some meat, you can eat meat. That's fine. But not for forgiveness. No, you cannot sacrifice. Because that they have the ultimate sacrifice for the forgiveness of sin through Jesus. That is what Jesus' whole story is this ultimate sacrifice. There's no need for sacrifice for Christians.
So when the temple was still there,
What?
when the temple was still there before 70 AD, could they still sacrifice?
They were doing it as Jews, not as Christians.
No, but the Christians.
And you copied Jews
the
And
Jews
put in
were doing
Bible.
their sacrifice. They were continuing and not following. There were some
You mean
Jews-
Jewish Christians?
Okay, there were some Jewish Christians and there were some Jews. There were non-Christian Jews. Okay, so the Jews would have done that. Now the Christian Jews, it was a transition period. So then God would, they would have, this is a transition, right? Because they're not transitioning from Judaism to Christianity, right? So for the first 10, 20 years of Christianity, a lot of Jews would ask questions and they're like circumcision. As a Christian, do you have to do circumcision? And this was a big debate in the New Testament. And they said, no, that covenant was for the Jews. Now the circumcision is of your heart.
It was for Abraham, not the Jews.
That
It was
is
from
circumcision
Abraham.
of heart.
You have now knowledge of what you're talking.
Sorry, say that again?
Do Jewish Christians need to be circumcised?
Jewish Christian. If you're Jew, it's not a sin to have circumcision. Okay, so there's no prohibition in Christianity about circumcision. There are a lot of Christians that I am circumcised. A lot of Christians are circumcised. So it's not a mandatory to be circumcised. It's not like a sin not to or to do. It's either way. It's not mandatory because what is mandatory is a circumcision of heart, meaning your circumcision is also kind of sacrifice. If you don't understand the concept of it, it's a sacrifice. Let me tell you what. I'm just trying to correct it because when you circumcise your heart, you're controlling your heart.
That's lie.
That's circumcision.
That
of
is
heart.
lie.
Okay?
You tell
So
lies.
That is what God is looking for, is that you're going to circumcise all your desires for God. That is the circumcision of heart that Jesus is talking about. And he said the circumcision of the body is like, it was a sign for the, God took Jews from people who didn't know God at all to teach. Like you take a child, you cannot put him in a university. You have to send him to kindergarten, then you have to send him to high school and college, and then you go to
You
university.
make lies.
Right?
You
So
tell
God
lies.
took these people to bring
You
his,
tell lies.
his message to the world. But these
You're a
people
liar.
were not like in one day God went, and then they knew everything about God and they were like, okay, we are holy. No, it took a long time for them to fall down, get up, God, they do this, do that, they fall down, they do this, God is like, disciplining
So
them.
it's not all loving.
No, he said if you have a child and you don't use the stick,
Yes.
you're not a good parent.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
so some Christian Jews did sacrifice and did circumcise.
Some Christian Jews did
So
sacrifice.
ethnically Jewish, but embraced Christ.
Yeah.
Christian Jews.
There was a transitional period. I don't know what they did, bro. You're asking a question that is not, like he said, salvation question, and it doesn't matter. Because if you did, like I said, okay, now let me answer that more precisely. I'll answer it. If I'm a Christian and I want to do a sacrifice, it's something that's unnecessary.
So
Can
why
I
would,
do it?
But why would they do it?
They wouldn't.
If they did, why would they do it?
Who, the Jews or the Christians?
Christian Jews.
Christian Jews. There is no Christian Jew. What are you talking about, Christian
Jewish
Jews?
people.
Who converted to Christianity,
became Christian.
they should not be sacrificing anymore.
Why? Yeah.
Because that's a Jewish religion. Are they Jews? They should be sacrificed.
Well, they're
If they're-
Jewish Christians.
then there's no mandate for them to sacrifice.
But what if they did?
They can't. Okay,
They
to become.
can't. Why?
Let me answer that. They can't because to become Christian is to accept the ultimate sacrifice,
Which is Jesus.
which is Jesus.
Which nullifies the animal sacrifice.
Thank you.
But
You're
what if-
smart,
But
man.
what if there were Jews, Jewish Christians,
Yeah.
who did sacrifice?
I don't know any Jewish Christians
Paul.
who did say, huh?
Paul.
Oh, okay, Paul. There was a time when, okay, now you're talking about the
Stand down.
transition. Okay, now, let me answer that. There was a transition period. There was a confusion going around. Oh, the Jews were under the impression in order to follow Jesus, you have to first follow Judaism to the T, meaning
The laws.
do the circumcision. Yeah, the laws, meaning you have to circumcise. Even if you were a Greek, let's say, or a Roman, and you listen to Paul and you say, okay, I think I'm going to accept Jesus. So wait. Before you accept
Yeah,
Jesus,
so-
first you have to go and fulfill the law. And by the way, go and get that thing cut. Otherwise, you're not going to be a Christian. Okay? That was what was going on. So there was a transition period where people were doing half Jewish and half this
What
stuff.
people did that?
The Jews that were converting to Christianity.
Who were they?
The Jews, the Israelites.
Did any of the disciples do it?
Well, like you said, Paul did it, right? Okay. Paul did it. If you read that passage, and I don't remember that quote, is in the context of he was preaching to the Jews, right?
Both.
Both. Okay.
Gentile and Jews.
Right. And what does he say about the sacrifice? I'm not very familiar with this passage, so excuse me on that. Do you want to pull up that passage?
Yes, in Acts chapter 21.
Okay, let's read
verses
that.
21
Okay,
to
yeah, remind me,
26. Paul makes his final visit to Jerusalem,
Yeah.
and he tells them that there's many people have become Christian, and then James tells him that, look, how many Jews who have now believed, and they're all zealous for the law, and they have been informed that you teach Jews living among Gentiles to forsake Moses and not to circumcise their children. So they say to Paul, take these men who have undergone a vow.
So let's read it.
In this way, people would know that there's no truth in these reports about you, but that you yourself live under the law of Moses. And so the next day, Paul pays for the expenses of the men to have their heads shaved, and he goes into the temple and makes a sacrifice.
Okay. Let's read that.
Oh, okay. So Acts chapter 21, verse 21.
Arrival. Can we start the polemics or up
Okay,
here?
so-
Paul and James in Jerusalem after these days.
Okay, so verse 15. After these days, we made preparation for our journey. They went up to Jerusalem. Some of the disciples from Caesarea came along to lead us to the house of Manson, Crypta, a disciple of long standing, with whom we were to stay. When we reached Jerusalem, the brothers welcomed us warmly, the Jerusalem Christians. The next day, Paul accompanied us on a visit to James, James the brother of Jesus, and all the presbyters, meaning the elders, were present, and he greeted them, then proceeded to tell them in detail what God had accomplished among the Gentiles through his ministry. They praised God when they heard it, but said to him, brother, you see how many thousands of believers there are from among the Jews, and they are all zealous observers of the law. They have been informed that you are teaching all the Jews who live among the Gentiles to abandon Moses, and that you are telling them not to circumcise their children or to observe the customary practices. What is to be done? They will surely hear that you have arrived. So do what we tell you. We have 4 men who have taken a vow. Take these men and purify yourself with them, and pay their expenses that they may have their heads shaved. In this way, everyone will know that there is nothing to report, that there is nothing to the reports they have been given about you, but that you yourself live in observance of the law. As for the Gentiles who have come to believe, we sent them our decision that they abstain from meat sacrificed to idols, from blood, from meat of strangled animals, and from unlawful marriage. And so Paul took the men on the next day, after purifying himself together with, and entered and give notice of the day when purification was completed, and the offering was made for each of them. So here they make an animal sacrifice to complete the vows that they
Very
underwent.
good. Naz, does it say anything about Gentiles in there?
Yeah, they don't have to abide by certain things.
Yeah, as for the Gentiles
Circumcision,
who've come to believe,
certain other stuff.
they should abstain from meat sacrificed to an idol.
All right.
From
Well, the
blood.
Gentiles believers.
Yeah, Christians. Yeah.
Thank you. So your answer is right in that passage, and I'm glad thank you for reading that. It's very nice. The answer is in the passage. He is talking to Jews who were zealous about keeping Judaism intact. And hold on.
That's not the question. The question is, why did Paul sacrifice? Because I asked you,
These were
do Jewish
Christians.
Christians need to sacrifice? You
Now,
said,
Idris.
hold on, you said they don't. I goes, well, what if they did? You said it's not obligatory. No problem, it's not obligatory. But then you said the sacrifice was Jesus' death and
okay,
resurrection,
right.
which abrogated, abstained
Yeah.
from the animal sacrifice.
Right.
But yet,
He is sacrificing here.
But yet James, the head of the Council of Jerusalem, along with Peter, who was going to be the Rock, the head of the Roman Church.
No, that's
has-
your
has-
there's no
hold on.
historical evidence of
Hold
that,
on,
by the
hold
way.
on, hold on.
Yeah.
Oh, he's not, because it's Catholic. Because it's Catholic Church.
That's,
Peter and Ron.
I don't care who's.
Peter
is,
and Ron.
is that in the Bible?
Is that what you take exception to?
Is that in the Bible?
I withdraw that. No
Thank
problem.
you, thank
But what my point is, James
It's fine. Sorry, carry on.
and Peter, sorry, James advises Paul to conduct those rituals. And then Paul conducted the ritual.
You don't have to repeat the whole story because I've just gone through
So
it.
that's the question.
So the
sorry.
question is that, okay, let me just reiterate it so you don't think that I'm misquoting or misunderstanding the question. Paul is doing the sacrificial ritual, which is not Christian, according to, because of your understanding that if Christ has paid for the sin, there is no need for blood sacrifice. Therefore, why would Paul be doing this sacrifice? Is that okay for me to? Okay, thank you. So I'm not misunderstanding or misquoting anything. Thank you. In the same passage, we read about the Gentiles. That's why it's really good to read the passage because the Bible will answer itself. The Gentiles were exempt from all of these rituals, including sacrifice, including circumcision and everything, because they're Gentiles. Now, if there were Jews that were doing it, he would allow them to do it. Because that's what I was saying, there was a transition period where a lot of Jews were continuing to follow the Jewish rituals, and then accepting. Now, for Jews to accept Jesus was to accept him as the Messiah. Okay? It takes a while for them to understand what that really means, because to them Messiah meant the Savior, and they thought that this and that. But when he preached to them, that was their thing. But they still didn't want to go. You see, you're Muslims. You don't want to give up Islam, no matter how much we tell you. You don't. The Jews are like that too. They listen to him, they accept it, but they still continue to follow both things. They want to be like, fulfill the law, and they want to accept Jesus as their Savior. That's the thing. So that whole passage, Paul is saying, okay, as Jews, these four guys, let them do this. Okay, fine. But these Gentiles, they don't need to do anything. That's the answer.
Well, the passage is to refute the idea that Paul is teaching Jews not to forsake or abandon the law of Moses, whereas Paul says so in his own words in his letter to the Corinthians in 1 Corinthians chapter 9 verse 20. To the Jews, I become like one under the law, even though I don't regard myself as being under the law. But
He said I don't regard myself as being under the law.
Yeah, in 1 Corinthians chapter 9 verse 20.
All right. That is a very big statement, by the way.
Doesn't he equate it to a man divorcing his wife?
Right.
I don't know.
What did he equate it to when divorcing his wife? Tell me that.
The law, no?
Yeah. Okay. You
law.
see, okay, all right.
Am I right?
I think so.
So
it's vague on my
to the
mind.
Jews I become as a Jew
yeah.
in order to
And the
win
Gentile,
Jews, and to those under the law I become as one under the law, though not being myself under the law, that I might win those under the law.
That I might win those under the law. Now,
Whereas in Acts chapter 21,
Yeah.
verse 24,
yeah.
he said, James says to Paul, take these men and purify yourself so that they may have the head shaved, and thus all will know that there is nothing in what they have been told about you, but that you yourself also live in observance of the law.
Yeah. Now, the law
So Paul
was
does one
applicable.
thing, but he says something else.
Right. The law was still applicable according to the. Okay. There are certain things that God will allow. Okay, and there are certain things. Okay, there are certain things that God allows for a period of time, like divorce. Like in the Old Testament, they came to Jesus and asked him about divorce, and Jesus, divorce. Do you know what Jesus said about it? Right? That to them, in the old days, because of the hardness of your heart, God allowed you to divorce. But I say to you, whoever leaves a woman except for sexual immorality is committing adultery. What does that mean? That means that he's doing stuff that in the old days, so God would allow you to do something because of the hardness of your heart, or because you're a Jew and you want to do all this stuff because to you this is like the law and you grew up with this. Like Muslims, they grew up with something. No, we have to do that because that's what it is. So Jews were like that. They grew up with the law, so they wanted to follow the law to the T. And he said, okay, for you, that's fine. He doesn't want to, in the Bible, there's a concept that don't do things that'll be a stumbling block to your brother. If he doesn't eat meat, then don't eat meat in front of him. Okay? So you see what I'm saying? That's how the philosophy of the New Testament is. It's like, don't become a stumbling block for somebody. If he wants to follow his religion, his Jewishness, and to the T, let him do it. As long as he follows Jesus. That's what he's saying, that I might win some to Christ. So he's winning the souls. Because it'll take, like I said, it'll take them
does
time.
that fall in line even with the Sabbath? So if they was doing the Sabbath before, even though they've accepted Jesus, should they still keep the Sabbath day holy?
Or animal sacrifices at the temple. If they were doing that before they were Christian and now they become, can they still continue to make animal sacrifices?
Okay, was Paul saying, I'm not under the law, right? Because he himself is not. But there are people around him, if he goes out, like Muslims will say, why didn't Jesus say I'm God? Because he's not that dumb. That if a man comes to you and say, I'm God, hey, what he did was one step further. He proved that he's God by doing stuff that only God can do. Like healing people, like giving sight to the blind. That's what Jesus was like that. He wouldn't, because if he said that, that would be a stupid statement. Because if anybody who says I'm God, you send them to the mental institute because you're mentally not there.
We're starting to get a little off topic. What I'm saying is that if they was following the Sabbath before, and they wanted to follow the Sabbath now, would that still be applicable?
I'm so sorry. It's getting a little bit like, it's like 7:30, bro.
Okay.
I've been here
Do you want to speak
like,
next week or
we can
another
speak.
time? Yeah.
This was a lovely conversation. Please
Yeah,
keep
Nice,
going.
I enjoyed it.
man.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for
guys.
being respectful. So
Of
appreciate
course,
it.
and thank you for being
speaking to you
respectful.
too, yeah.
You are respectful always.
Nah.
He's respectful, but it's hard to
Oh,
find.
thank you.
But we didn't get any hecklers, and my brother here has been very patient.
Alhamdulillah,
Which
yeah.
is a great thing. Thank you very much. All right, guys.
All right.
Talk to you next time.
Okay,
Get on
nice.
safely, yeah?
So, as you read, the main point is this, as you said. He's teaching the Jews one thing,
Yeah.
and in the council they're saying,
He does the opposite to what he
you're
preaches.
teaching them this, to
Yeah.
show them that you haven't taught this.
Yeah.
Go and do, thank you, brother, go and do the Nazarite vow.
Yeah, sure. We
Okay.
maybe speak to
But-
That
But then he goes on,
yeah.
even afterwards, to carry on, as he did before the Nazarite vow, Council of Jerusalem, to continue preaching it. So he preached it, then so-called supposedly recanted it
went
to the
back to
Jerusalem
preaching.
Council of Jerusalem, and then went on to preach it. So like he said, Jew to Jew, Gentile to Gentile.
yeah, this is where he says,
So he's
"I'll be
two-faced.
all things to all men." Yeah.
Yeah,
So
something
basically,
like
what
that.
he's saying is, "I'm going to lie through my teeth to you just to get you to do what I
Yeah.
want you to do." Yeah.
Well,
That's
yeah.
what that bit is.
He has
Rubbish about you know.
The
that
thing
they have
is,
to
he
be
has
weaned
good
out.
intent. Like he wants to try to save as much as people as he can. But the problem is, these were already believers. They already believed in Jesus, so they don't need to be saved.
Most
They're
of them,
already
yes.
saved.
They were
But they're
what they call
saying-
messianic Jews.
Yeah.
Yeah. They weren't Christian Jews. They were messianic
Yeah.
Jews. So they actually believed
That Jesus is the Messiah. Yeah.
that he was the Messiah, but
Yeah.
they didn't believe what they believe about him being the Son of God and all
Yeah.
that kind of lovely stuff. They are what Muslims consider Ahl Kitab. They were the originals,
People of the book.
people
yeah.
of the
So
book.
let's read this again. Acts 21:20.
Jazakallah khair for helping me with that, because I
no,
wasn't too
it's,
sure.
I'm
Because we was
not-
talking originally about Kabani and all that. So he said, listen, go to me with anyone that nobody wants to talk to me. So it's like, if you go to them, they'll speak to you. I said,
thing
brother,
is to remember is
but what I'm
there's
saying to him is,
many-
if you speak to any Muslim, they'll answer you. He's saying, no, as soon as they see me, they're going to not want to talk to me. I said, all right, cool, I'll ask her, brother, and if we'll get a better
This
understanding.
is the first time me and Sam have had a decent conversation.
Yeah.
We've not really spoken before, so
Yeah.
it's nice to have.
Yeah.
So Acts 21:19. Paul greeted them and reported in detail, as you said, what God had done among the Gentiles through his ministry.
Yeah.
Okay. When they heard this, they praised God. To Paul, see, brother, how many thousands of Jews have believed, and all of them are zealous for the law. They have been informed that you teach all Jews who live amongst the Gentiles to turn away from Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children or live according to the customs. What shall we do? they will certainly hear that you have come.
Exactly.
Because what happens?
And these are believers.
The
Christians
Jews mob him,
at the temple.
and at the temple,
Okay, I'm going to spin.
So Michael,
Assalamu
and a Roman centurion,
What's the name?
Zachariah.
Zachariah.
Assalamu
Okay.
alaikum.
the Jews mob him, and then Paul has to tell a Roman centurion he is what? A Roman citizen. So he protects him, and he takes him into protection.
okay.
Because the Jewish Christians heard, as said here, when they have heard this, basically that he's teaching the Jews not to abide by the law. Okay? So he's teaching them this. Okay? And in the Council of Jerusalem, they say, here we go. They have been informed that you teach all the Jews who live among the Gentiles to turn away from Moses, telling them not to circumcise their children, to live according to the customs. What shall we do? They will certainly hear you have come. So do what we tell you. The 4 men with us have made a vow. Take these men and do the Nazarite vow. Number 1.